Lance Wood with National Weather Service. Houston, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, first off, tornado sirens, what are they?
Yeah, so ever since the tornado emergency that we had back in January 2023, we've gotten some questions about sirens. And I think mainly because Deer Park, the city of Deer Park actually activated their sirens for that tornado. I think they recognized how significant that tornado was when we issued an emergency statement on it, emergency warning on it. Um, And so those sirens are usually there or put in place originally for chemical emergencies so that you could go inside if you heard this siren and there had been a release at one of the petrochemical facilities. So that's why places like Deer Park and Pasadena, they have outdoor sirens. So it kind of comes up, it's kind of the community's choice, as far as what is the policy with those sirens. And so we know they're a pretty good outdoor warning tool. Not so great for inside. You may not hear it inside, depending on how far away you are. So that's kind of the deal with the sirens, at least in our part of the country. Um, they were generally put in place for chemical emergencies, could be used in a tornado situation, but it's up to, that city or that emergency manager that, it was with that city.
How often do we have chemical emergencies that we need a siren dedicated to that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I would know the answer to that. I mean, obviously we have had some. Um, we had the explosion there, the ITC explosion
Also in Deer
a few
Park,
years
right?
ago in 2019. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
what about the Deer Park pipeline that exploded?
yeah, I mean, we've had several. We've had several events. You can go back to Harvey with Arkema flooding and that refrigeration facility lost refrigeration, and then we had an explosion there. So, I mean, you go back in history, there's probably enough of a risk uh, in Southeast Houston and Deer Park, Pasadena, that whole area, I would say to have sirens for chemical emergencies because you definitely want people to be inside sheltering in place quickly with that kind of threat.
Couldn't a shelter, so I understand that it might cause confusion, but isn't a shelter in place a shelter in place? Like, what does it matter if it's a shelter in place because of a chemical reaction or because there's a tornado happening?
It's a good point. I think you're right. With a tornado and a chemical emergency, uh, you have similar actions, right? You want to get inside, be in a safe place. Now, with a tornado, you'd want to be in like an interior room, lowest floor. So that's a little bit different. So some of the particulars are different, but yes, you do not want to be outside in a tornado, and you don't want to be outside in a chemical emergency either. So I think they do have similar calls to action. But one issue I see with a siren is when it goes off, you don't necessarily know why it's going off. Like if you compare this to the wireless emergency alert you would get on your phone, from a warning that we issue, you have more information. Like why am I getting this alert? It's specific to a tornado.
And this might be a stupid question, so forgive me, but I remember just as a child watching TV and it would be like, this is a test of the emergency broadcast system. What is the
Yeah.
difference between that and these sirens?
Um, well, so we do have
I'm
the
sorry if
EAS
it's a
system.
stupid
Yeah,
question,
no,
but
we do have the EAS system that can be alerted. I guess that would, you automatically scroll on your TV and you get information that way. So there's lots of things that you can issue an EAS for. We have like a regional team that goes over what should be in that kind of alerting. I think like I said, the biggest issue I see with sirens, not that they don't have some outdoor use, is just the lack of information that comes with them. But you kind of go searching for more information, if you were to hear a siren. Um, you just don't know exactly why it's issued. But I think if you lived in Pasadena and Deer Park, you know, you would probably you would probably at least know it could be a chemical emergency, because you're only really going to hear a siren for that reason or a tornado. So it is kind of one of two. So it wouldn't be too hard to figure out pretty quickly.
you brought up the lack of information. We do have a lot of people that are moving to Houston and for the right reasons. Um, how do we bridge that gap? I mean, what is something that like Like who's responsible for distributing that information? Is it us as journalists?
Yeah, well, as far as information, yeah, I think that's a pretty broad topic, but it's probably everybody that's trying to get alerts out has got to do the best job they can, with communication. Like I only really know it from the weather side. I'm not an expert in, of course, all kind of emergencies, but I was just pointing out that that is a weakness of the siren is you don't know the why of it, and you will go seeking for more information. Now, I know like during the tornado emergency that was being put out there. I mean, like Deer Park has a callback system, and so people that have signed up for reverse callback or to get notification from the city it can be pushed to them. So you could hear the siren, and then you might also get it on your phone, and it would fill in the blanks really quickly. So I guess the point is there's lots of ways to get information. If you had a weather radio, for example, it would also go off during the tornado warning. So one of the things that when I'm out doing any kind of outreach, a talk, or any kind of educational uh, any kind of outreach with weather, I always talk about you have multiple ways to get warnings, just in case one doesn't work or you need more information. Maybe you get multiple ways of getting it. So that's why even though it's old technology, the weather radios is still reliable. And so if you could have a weather radio, you could set it to alarm or not alarm. If you don't want it to wake you up in the middle of the night, you have flexibility. Again, we almost all of us have smartphones. I think I looked it up the other day. It's like 90% of folks in the United States have a smartphone. So you have the ability, most people, to get the wire alert, the wireless emergency alerts, and then you have some flexibility to how you want that set up on your phone. So we have ways to get information. So a lot of it does depend on how the individual person prefers to get it.
So in other words, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in your professional personal opinion, it sounds like a tornado siren won't really do much for us, like if we had one in the city.
Yeah, so that's a very tough question to answer. I mean, I'm not against tornado sirens, and I think it did help in the tornado emergency, because it just kind of amplified the message, I think, in that case. But I think, when you really look at this in our part of the country used for a tornado warning, it's probably debatable. May have some use, but does it have enough use to put them in if you don't have them? I think with the other ways we have alerting, yeah, I don't know that it's necessary. It's
Well, and I've
probably
heard they're not the cheapest. Is that correct?
right. I imagine it's very expensive, and they have limited range, so you have to have multiple sirens. You have to maintain it. You have to test it. You have to do some outreach so people know that it's there and why it's going off. So there is a lot that goes on with sirens, and I think in today's age, with like I said, the majority of people having other ways to get warning information and personalized to them with your phone in particular, yeah, it may not be necessary. You also have to look at the frequency that we get the kind of tornadoes that you really want this. You're not going to want this going off maybe for the weakest of tornadoes, and we get a lot of weak tornadoes. You want this going off for the significant tornadoes. Well, we most of ours are not that, so it's less than 10%. So um, you can see how there's these pluses and minuses here, and this is kind of why it's left up to the communities to decide. But if you have them, yeah, I could see a dual purpose here. Like if you have them for the chemical emergency, probably a good idea to use it at times for a tornado threat, especially if you think it's a significant tornado threat. If you don't have them, it might not be worth it.
This has been a very weird year for like weather events, especially in Houston. We had like winter storms in January, the derecho in May, Hurricane Beryl, and then two tornadoes. Uh, I mean, how do you, from a scientist perspective, but also from someone who I would imagine has a family, how do you keep people from not panicking or people that like maybe coming in from Houston are like, I thought you guys just had floods. Where is all this coming from?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do have multiple threats here along the Gulf Coast here. I mean, We do have a cold season tornado threat. This isn't the first time, we've had significant tornadoes in the winter. Obviously, the emergency was in January. I never thought that my first tornado emergency in Houston would be in January because it's not our most likely month for that, but that's how it played out. So yeah, we can get tornadoes year round, and we do have that. We do have a peak in the cold season. Um, so so I guess people are learning that if they didn't know that. I think that the hurricane threat's probably most people are aware of that when they move here. We do a pretty good job on outreach with hurricanes, but flooding, when if you go back to 2015, 16, and 17, uh, we had flood after flood after flood, right? We had Tax Day, we had Memorial Day night flood, we had Harvey. So flooding is in the history of Houston, recent and way back. That's why we had the Barker reservoir built out there. It was because of a 1935 flood. So Houston has had um, lots of we have lots of active weather, and we get Arctic intrusions. We're talking about that potentially for next week. How cold is it going to get? So very active part of the country has been very active this year and recently. Yeah. So um, we have to be aware of a lot of different weather threats.
Well, so how do you just tell people, hey, be aware, but don't panic. Come to Houston, sure, live here, move here. We've got a lot of great things to offer. Don't worry
Well, no
about the
matter
weather.
yeah, no matter where you live, you're going to have risks. So I don't I don't know that you wouldn't want to come to Houston because we have extreme weather. I mean, it's not like that most of the time. You just have to be weather aware and prepared. So I think I just preach preparedness, not necessarily, not living here. I mean, I lived here my whole life pretty much. So I grew up in Sharpstown. So I came back. I still like living here.
I came back. Yeah, I was in
Yeah.
San Antonio for 4 years.
Yeah, so I mean, I mean, I like Houston, has a lot of nice things to offer. I just think you have to be prepared for especially for floods and hurricanes, and occasionally we have some significant tornadoes, so we have to be ready for that.
You said you do a lot about education and everything. Where can people go to kind of learn more about the educational talks that you give?
Yeah, so I mean, our website's a good place to start. We have a lot of information there, and we have links uh, to other places that have information. So weather.gov/Houston /Houston. You could start there. Well, like I said, we link to a lot of preparedness information on our website. So if you're concerned about tropical cyclones, there's information on there. If you're concerned about winter storms, we also have links there for winter storms. So we kind of have to take it by season. So right now, that's what we've been seeing, tornadoes and winter storms, so are the potential winter storms.
Well, so in other words, you guys don't control the weather, you guys just study it.
Yes, and you'll hear people out there that say that we may have some control over the weather, but we really don't know, and we do not. I don't
Come
have
on,
any.
Lance, you can tell me.
No, we're not able to control the weather yet. So hopefully that doesn't actually
Yet.
come our way, because I don't think you'd want that responsibility. But yeah, we just focus on preparation and making sure people are weather aware, and yeah, that's our main goal, is protection of life and property. So
Was there anything else you want to add?
no, I think that's two great questions.
Well, thank you. Lance Wood with the National Weather Service in Houston. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Ahmed.